Unfortunately, we lost another great voice in rock and roll this week, the great Mark Lanegan, best known as the lead singer of Screaming Trees. We discuss on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're in the U.S., you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com. Please subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Really appreciate it. Just a couple days ago, news broke that we lost Mark Lanegan. Passed away, no details as of yet, but it doesn't matter. He's gone, and it's another hard pill to swallow and a long list of musicians from a very pinnacle time in my musical existence. You can go down the long list of obviously Kurt Cobain and Lane Staley and Chris Cornell and Shannon Hoon and all these greats. I could keep going and going. It's a very sad thing as I get older to see all of my heroes and people that I've looked up to from a musical standpoint pass away. And Mark Lanegan is another one on that list now, unfortunately. I was introduced to Screaming Trees initially with this album here, which I think was maybe the entry point for a lot of people from a mainstream perspective, when the single soundtrack came out and their biggest song ever, which was Nearly Lost You, on the album Sweet Oblivion. Definitely my entry point, but the band predated those albums and took them years to kind of break through. They were in the early days of what is considered now to be the grunge scene back in, they were late 80s. They were there at the beginning with Soundgarden and bands like Malfunction and then Mother Love Bone. Again, predating Nirvana and obviously Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and these other bands that kind of came at the cusp of the 90s, right, and kind of broke open the scene. And that's the thing for me about Mark Lanegan that I think stands out the most is just really underappreciated. I think he had such a unique style, a unique voice, and I think the Screaming Trees as a band really represented, if you're going to use the word grunge to describe that scene, which I honestly am not a huge fan of, but if you're going to use it, I can't think of a better example as far as a grungy style of music. I think them and Alice in Chains kind of had that vibe, certainly Soundgarden. And again, but I think Screaming Trees were the underappreciated, kind of little brother, even though they were founders of it in a lot of ways. And that's no different than any local scene, for every Nirvana or Pearl Jam or Soundgarden or Alice in Chains, there's another, 20 or 30 or more bands behind that don't break through and have as much mainstream success. That being said, Screaming Trees definitely had their day, and I think Sweet Oblivion was kind of the highlight of that. I was lucky enough to see the band on that tour on Lollapalooza '96, which was a great experience. Soundgarden was on that tour as well. But I think when I think about Mark Lanegan, I just think about the voice. I think about the voice, and I think about the stoic stage presence. I really always kind of saw him and Lane Staley as very similar musicians and singers stylistically, very different voices tonally, but from a vibe perspective and the way they carried themselves, very, very similar. I've got a few other Screaming Trees records. This is one I just recently picked up, Uncle Anesthesia. And then I've got one of their earlier records, which is Even If and Especially When from 1987, which is really cool, some of that early stuff. But Mark's legacy didn't stop there. He collaborated with so many musicians and was so, I think, well respected within that community of musicians, which was prominent, of course, in the 90s and still to today, honestly. He played a major role on this record with Mad Season, backing vocals, and performed with the band when they did play live for the few shows they did play. And he's got a stamp all over this. When you hear that deep kind of scowl, it's completely unique to him, in my opinion. Same could be said for Queens of the Stone Age. He's all over this record, and without his voice on it, I think it changes the vibe completely. Because he just did really have, I don't want to say one of a kind, but again, kind of almost a Jim Morrison mystique to him, and with that deep, deep kind of growl he presented. So, you know, I'm gonna miss Lanegan. I'm gonna miss the mystique, and most importantly, I think it's just again a sign of where we're at these days, getting older myself, and starting to kind of realize that, man, the next 20 years and beyond, it's going to really be tough to see all these people leave us. And it kind of hit me when I read the news about Mark again, the same way, maybe not on the same level because my fandom isn't the same with Mark as it was with, like, say, a Chris Cornell. But I have the same kind of sentiment and the same feelings in that, oh man, here we go again. Like, another one gone, another great voice, another iconic musician from an era that really changed my life. Certainly, that early '90s rock and roll resurgence of alternative rock, to this day. And if you went through my record collection, you would see the amount of albums from that time period that is represented, and Screaming Trees is a part of that, and the single soundtrack, and Mad Season, and Queens of the Stone Age. And I do have, I've only got one of Mark's solo records. I think this was the last one he put out, but he had an extensive solo career. I just don't have a lot of it on vinyl, but I'm familiar with a lot of it. I think he put out 12 solo albums. So a very productive artist, despite a lot of health issues that he had over the years with addiction. And I am looking forward to reading. I know he's put out at least one or two books that I've heard are really great. So I'm definitely going to dive into those and check them out. But overall, I'm just saddened at another loss of a great musician. One that I think is underappreciated and kind of underrated, because when you name the top few artists from that time period, Screaming Trees usually isn't in the top 10 or 15 or 20 of most people's list, and they probably should be, because they were there at the beginning and they started a lot of it, and I think their music really does hold up well. And so again, that's kind of what I wanted to say today. I don't have a huge agenda of content to go through. I've been listening to all these records over the last day or two since the news broke, and it's really kind of setting in, how special Mark was, and what he did for that music community. And I'm glad we had him as long as we did. And I know people that, I'm sure people that knew him personally, are as saddened about losing a friend or a family member as much as a musician. But for me, on the outside, it's, not knowing the guy, obviously, just being exposed to his music over the years, I've got a great appreciation for who he was and what he did from a musical standpoint, because I think it was really original. I think he was one who really did his own thing. He had his own style, like I mentioned, and more than anything, that's what I've always appreciated him. So appreciate you tuning in. I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about Mark and how important he is, and I felt like, I didn't want to go on without putting some sort of content out or video out about such an important musician for that early '90s scene. And if you're not familiar with Screaming Trees or some of these albums I mentioned, definitely check them out. All fantastic rock records through and through. And again, a lot of his solo stuff is really well done too. So just a really prolific musician that will certainly be missed. So thanks for watching. This is Talking About Records. We'll be back again. I'll pop up some other videos here. You guys definitely explore the channel. Really appreciate all the support, and we'll see you again next time.